Hello, this is Keith George, and this screencast will walk you through using the template for your lesson plan that is based on the EEE framework. So most of the instructions are in the module under EEE framework. So I'm going to go right into opening the template and working with it directly. So you click the link on the template, and it's going to automatically open up uh, your Google Drive in the Google Sheets asking if you want to create a copy of this document. And you do, so click Make a Copy. And in the background, it will make an exact copy of the template for you. So the very first thing you need to do is come up to the title, and you need to change the title so that it has your first and last name, and then preferably the title of your lesson, and then you can take out the rest. Okay, and then if you just click someplace else, you see that your lesson has now been renamed. Now, you will again enter the title in the first cell, lesson title. Now, what I've done with creating this template is I have pre-populated several of the areas and created some formatted cells that will make things a little easier for you. So please pay attention to where you're typing. You don't want to click here for grade level and type that because you'll erase that. But if you click on the arrow tip here, notice that you get a drop down where you can select the time frame as well and the subject. So we'll do a social studies lesson. So now under learning goals, the goals actually go here in this cell. And this is just a free-form typing cell, so you'll double click so that you can type, and you'll enter your content goals here. Now, what you're probably going to do for your content goals is get them from perhaps the ALEKS website, and you can copy and paste them. However, let me show you what's going to happen. If I jump to a new window and go to ALEKS, and jump to resources, courses of study, social studies. I think I chose 7th grade. So if this is the standard that I want, I can select it and copy it. And then when I jump back to my lesson, if I go into my content goals area and paste it, everything should be fine. It won't cause any problems. Now notice that it goes a little bit long until you click out, and then it formats it correctly. Make sure you also include how the goal will be met. Now, for the next section, under technology-based goals, you get to select the strand that you are addressing. So you can just check digital citizen. And now for the ISTE standards, you can select the standards and it will put them in for you. And you can select up to 3. Remember, when you're selecting standards, it's not necessarily the more the merrier. You want to make sure that you address the standard completely, so you may or may not actually want to have a bunch of standards. Remember, for each one, you're going to include how the goal will be met. If there happen to be any other goals, for instance, if you're doing a cross-curricular lesson, if you're addressing some particular skill, you can include that information here. And again, make sure you include how it will be met if you include it. Simply type in your materials list, technology-based materials, Your lesson overview. Share how the activities in the lesson will help meet the learning goals. Remember that even though this looks like a smaller box, this is going to be the summary of your lesson. This is the one paragraph, possibly two paragraphs, that you could share with somebody and then get an idea of what you're doing. Now, the heart of the lesson with the EEE framework comes from the digital tools that you integrate. Now, apparently this is an area where a lot of people have trouble, and if you notice, if you hover over where it says tool 1, 2, 3, and 4, it tells you to enter the name of the tool there. So your first tool is going to go here, and maybe you're using Nearpod. And for your second tool, maybe you're using Kahoot. And possibly there's a third tool, and you're using an interactive timeline. Now, what you're going to do for each of these tools, now you're looking vertically. What learning goal would be met by using this tool? Well, you're going to look back at your content goals and your technology goals. And this isn't going to be the standards pasted in here. This is going to be a learning goal. So maybe you're going to use Nearpod to address social studies standards as well as digital citizenship. And you'll do the same for each of them. Now notice I didn't include a fourth tool. You do not have to have 4 different digital tools in your lesson. However, you do need to have at least 2, and if you only have 2, there should be some in-depth integration. Many students in the past have tried to come in with just one tool, and they're basically, showing a Nearpod presentation, and that's not integration. So make sure that you choose an appropriate number of tools, but don't necessarily think you have to have all 4 if you're just trying to fill in time. Now, how is the digital tool going to be integrated? Nearpod is probably going to be done whole group, large group, or in teams. Your Kahoot, they're going to compete individually. Their interactive timeline, maybe you're going to have them work in pairs. And then we're getting down into the scoring part of the EEE framework. Now, I'm not going to go into the actual content of the scoring here because you've got the video already on that. But just to enter the scores, you're going to read over the prompt here and the rubric entries, the indicators, and you're going to enter a score by clicking the arrow tip and selecting 0, 1, or 2 for that. And you're going to do that for each part of the rubric. And as you notice, as you make your selections, the total is automatically calculated for you. And not only is it calculated, but if you have something that comes out scoring very low, it will stay red, but as you go higher, it will turn green based on if it is a score higher than 4, which indicates a acceptable level of integration. Now, having said that, it's okay if you have one area that is red if the other areas for the other prompts may score higher. But before we go on to that, what teaching moves could be integrated, you're going to select all of these that apply. This is our Nearpod. That would probably be guided practice and probably gradual release of learning. Then you'll go to your second prompt. You'll do your same scores again. And you'll do that for the third prompt. And that will bring us down here to the lesson setup. Now, the lesson setup is another area that many students do not complete fully. So you're going to need to articulate in this area what steps another teacher would need to go through to set up this digital tool. So for instance, for Nearpod, get free account. Locate or create presentation. Now, you saw when I went to add another line, it took me just a second because when you're inside a cell, you can't just hit return, it'll try to go to the next cell. You need to hold down control and then enter to go to another cell. To go to another line in the same cell. So you're going to think about all of these different areas, include everything that they would need for this particular tool to get the lesson set up. And you'll do that for each of the tools that you've done. Now, assessment. How will you assess the activities happening through the use of the tool? How are you going to do monitoring observations? Is it going to be formative? So again, you may be observe students during presentation. Let's do this as question for understanding. You're actually asking questions along the way. And then perhaps you'll have formative review activity. Something that's not graded, but that you go over to make sure that they understood the content. Now, this one, if you remember, is Kahoot. That's an assessment tool itself. You're probably going to, again, use that as a formative assessment. But perhaps one of these tools that you decide to use is an actual quiz tool that you would use as a grade, and maybe that would be a summative assessment. Here's the area that gets students in most trouble, the procedures. This is a minute-to-minute activity guide of what's happening in the lesson. It describes what the teacher is going to do, what students are going to do, and what the teacher is going to say. And you have a time of how long each of those activities is going to be going on. Now, please keep in mind that this should be detailed enough that another teacher could take this section and replicate the lesson with some degree of effectiveness. So don't put something like explain Nearpod. That's not descriptive enough. You're going to have to be much more descriptive than that. This will certainly be the largest area of your lesson plan. What students are going to be doing, again, there might be a few things where they are, for instance, during the Kahoot, they may be actively participating in Kahoot. That might be a brief description that would be acceptable. But most of the time, you're being much more descriptive. Students are researching the assigned topics using the internet by going to approved sites. You're going to be detailed with this, what the teacher is going to say, what kind of instructions you're going to be giving. This area, while it looks just like a little table, will be very, very full. You will have several sentences for most of these entries at each time level. So when I get this and I see, 15 or 20 words here, that's not going to be acceptable. This is a detailed description of every procedure that's happening during the lesson. So one of the ways that a lot of students get into trouble is they tell me that they're using Nearpod and Kahoot and Interactive Timeline, and then when I get down here to the procedures, I don't even see those things mentioned. They haven't even talked about how they're using them. They haven't given any instructions to the students on using them. They haven't prompted the students to open them or start using them. So anything that you include up here should be mentioned in the procedures. And by reading the procedures, I should get an idea of how you are meeting these goals that you've described up here. Okay, so there are some technical things that sometimes students run into problems. If you you have to be careful because some of these cells are grouped cells, and if you accidentally try to do some formatting or delete things, if you're not careful, sometimes it will take those, it'll unmerge those cells that have been merged, so you want to be careful about that. Also notice the alignment seems to be a little off here. That's just because there's an extra space at the end of that. So if you delete that extra space and hit enter, now you can read it better. If something goes over into another cell, make sure you've got your alignment set correctly. One of the tricky things about some of the assignments in this course that students don't realize is the multiple aspects of assessment that I am utilizing as we go through this course. So while this particular assignment is judging you and evaluating your ability to create a lesson using a pre-given template and evaluate the effectiveness of the various digital tools, I'm also making sure that you know how to work a spreadsheet and how to share a document and use a template and a variety of other things. So once you finish with your lesson plan on the template, it is a Google spreadsheet, so you do not have to save it. However, to share it, you'll want to make sure that you click the share button, and you'll want to do two things. The first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to add me as a collaborator using my personal email address. But then you'll also, and you'll want to make sure that I am either editor or commenter. If I'm just viewer, I can't do anything. Okay, so you'll want to do that. And then you'll also want to make sure that you share and down here under get link, you need to change the link. Yours may look a little different, but you'll need to change the link to anyone with the link. Anyone with the link can at least be a viewer, and then you'll copy that link. And that is the link that you will submit in Blackboard to turn in your assignment. Okay? Make sure that you've changed to anyone with the link is at least viewer or commenter, depending on what you would like. Do not let anyone with the link have editor permission. So viewer is probably the safest for this. And then copy that link, and that is what you will turn in Blackboard. Okay? You don't need to attach it. You don't need to try to convert it to a PDF. Just send the link in Blackboard with your complete statement. And now in another video, you'll learn how to embed this lesson into your LiveText portfolio, so you can watch for that. But for now, I hope this has given you a great overview of the template. And if you have any questions, feel free to check the FAQ discussion board or contact me through Blackboard. Thank you.